My Hero Academia's final season is now airing. Here are my thoughts of the first 5 episodes. With episode 1, I really liked how it started off exactly where the last episode ended of last season. I really like how the fight continued to progress, especially with how All Might used Class 1A's abilities in this suit for combat, with things like combining Froppy's suction cups and Duplarm's extra arms to be able to kind of crawl up the building to make him be able to travel a lot faster, using Tailman's big tail as a good defensive wall against a close quarters punch, or even Minetta's grapes to use to pin down All For One. But obviously, the biggest, most impactful one was Ayama's naval laser. Using it as such a giant laser to be able to actually injure All For One is really crazy. And then there's the end of the episode when Stain arrives. It was so cool to see that kind of last second moment where All For One was about to do a finishing blow to All Might, but then just gets frozen in his tracks. And then you see Stain flying in on a collider just like Green Goblin from Spider-Man, looking so menacing. It was so funny to see the face of shock and awe on both All Might and All For One when Stain came flying in. It was just that okay, this is gonna be cool type of moment. There isn't a whole lot to talk about with episode 2, because realistically, the most part it's basically just the rest of the fight of All For One versus All Might, until really the point where All For One kind of gets away from All Might and starts to try to warp towards Shigaraki. But then when Shigaraki just slams his mouth shut and just rejects All For One, it makes it so much nicer, so much better, because you know that Deku is already having a hard enough time with Shigaraki, so you definitely don't need All For One mixed in as well. So then this leads to All For One deciding to just finish off All Might. But of course, he's not just gonna finish him off just right then and there. He's gotta make a show out of it. But then we get the start of what ends up being one of the best moments in all of My Hero. Bakugo's awakening and him saving All Might is such a epic moment in such a crazy way. Episode 3 is where things really start to get interesting, because this is where it starts to turn from a Deku story to a Bakugo story. And for me, Bakugo is my favorite character from the show, so that makes this episode even better. It was so epic on how Bakugo went from the waking up to transitioning into going to save All Might, especially when he wakes up and Deku notices him and they kind of have this one little quick glance to each other. And Bakugo comes flying towards Deku, and that simple arm reach from Deku that kind of whips him across towards All For One to be able to get him there faster and right on time was so good, so well timed, and so kind of just interesting on how it's understood with just them kind of looking at each other. And then when Bakugo arrives and grabs All Might from his arms and flies across the scene, and it just stops for a moment and you just see the face of pure disbelief on All For One's face. That little just subtle moment on All For One's face is just so rewarding of how is this even possible when he was literally just about to kill All Might. It was super interesting to say the least. I really like the symbolism that they use to show that All Might is actually back from the brink of death by having his One For All avatar kind of just fully form back into its kind of ghostly form, and how it kind of just snaps out of him. And then when it gets into the fight with All For One, this isn't quite the most epic part of the fight yet. That I would say is not until episode 4. But I do like how they kind of interweaved a bit of All For One's backstory and showing the one character that actually causes All For One actually a bit of stress and discomfort, and how much the character kind of reminds him of Bakugo. And because of this, it actually makes All For One kind of give in to his emotions and make him want to actually go and fight Bakugo, even more so than even when he was fighting All Might or Endeavor. That just shows on how much of a presence Bakugo actually is. But the best part of the episode is probably at the end, where All For One is starting to get really frustrated with Bakugo. He starts freaking out at him. And then we get the rebuttal from Bakugo saying,
I got senile, you bastard! 'Cause my name is Kashan Bakugo!
So with something like that, it's such an epic way to end the episode. Just a quick pause for a moment. If you made it this far into the video, that must mean that you're liking it. So maybe consider giving it a like now. That way, by the time you get to the end of the video, you won't have to worry about it, and there's no chance that you'll forget. Alright, let's continue on with the video. Episode 4 was definitely the best episode of the season so far. Kind of starting off with All for One and One for All's backstory, kind of showing the full story of kind of how they got to where they are now. And then going into when they're a little bit older, probably around 10, maybe 12 years old, showing how they kind of got the names of One for All and All for One. And then we get back into the fight between Bakugo and All for One. And with this backstory that just happened and the backstory from last episode, you can see the amount of stress and kind of anguish that's on All for One's mind and how he's really trying to just deal with it, and by dealing with it, getting rid of Bakugo in this fight. That to be able to do so, he goes with this kind of All for One all-out attack to be able to put all of his abilities, all of his powers, all into one major final attack to be able to kill Bakugo. And that leads Bakugo into launching his final attack of launching his sweat into All for One's body to be able to create explosions from the inside. Though, one thing I do want to bring up is that it's kind of disappointing, at least to me, that Bakugo didn't get a plus ultra moment in this fight. Like in this moment when he's doing the final Howitzer impact, he definitely could have had the plus ultra instead of Howitzer, but I know that Howitzer is the name of his main attack and that's why he's yelling that, so that makes sense there. But there's definitely other parts in this fight that he still could have had a plus ultra moment. I don't know, I just think it was a bit of a missed opportunity for me. But then we get to the end of the fight and we get to see baby All for One. But of course, Bakugo's still there. I like how it's a way that Bakugo wins the fight, but without having to say that Bakugo killed a baby. Because of how much energy All for One has used, he had to use Rewind constantly, so it basically takes over and rewinds him into pre-existence. And I guess that works as well. And then I like how Bakugo was trying to be like All Might and standing with his fist raised up, but can't quite do it. So yeah, episode 4 was definitely the most interesting of the season so far, and it definitely ended in a very interesting way with how they decided to defeat All for One. Episode 5 was another pretty interesting episode, with it pretty much just jumping right back into the fight between Deku and Shigaraki, launching in basically right after All for One died. So Shigaraki ends up inheriting All for One and ends up mastering it pretty much instantly, with right away using it to steal Danger Sense from Deku. And now that Shigaraki's the one with Danger Sense, it majorly gives him the upper hand. By not only being able to just avoid all of Deku's attacks, but also being able to kind of manipulate where the fight is actually happening, and kind of brings himself and Deku to Mount Fuji. That's when they reinforce his plan to not only take out civilization, but to take out the actual land itself. He wants to destroy all of Japan. And I really like Deku's quick thinking in this moment of being able to create the largest Air Force punch that he's ever done, to be able to destroy all the land all around them, so that Shigaraki's decay has nothing to spread through, therefore it shouldn't be able to reach the mountain. And then, getting back into the main fight, I like how Deku used his experience from fighting Lady Nagant and kind of over-relying on Danger Sense in that fight, to now realizing its flaws and using that to his advantage. By throwing out a bunch of attacks all at once, it kind of overstimulates Danger Sense, so therefore Shigaraki doesn't exactly know where the actual major attack will be coming from. And then, after a bit more of the fight, we do get a very interesting character moment from the 7th user of One for All, Nina, with her trying to convince Deku that the only way to truly stop Shigaraki is for him to put in enough effort to actually kill him. But of course, Deku being Deku, he's not going to agree with a plan like that. Because to him, even someone as lost and gone and out of their mind as Shigaraki is, they still deserve the right to be saved. And then we get to the end of the episode where they come up with a plan to finally defeat Shigaraki by transferring One for All to him so that they can kind of just attack him from the inside. So they can kind of just break down his mind and his soul. This way they can kind of go with Deku's idea of saving the child inside of him. And fully explaining that plan and getting everyone on board with it is how the episode ends. So it's a good way to lead into episode 6. So those are my thoughts of the first 5 episodes of the final season. What do you guys think of the final season so far? Let me know in a comment below. And if you like me or any of the content that I make, maybe consider subscribing to the page. But other than that, I will see you in the next one. Bye.